In this video, I'm going to talk about the psychedelic Netflix series, The Midnight Gospel. Now, I am a huge fan of animation. I've been watching animated shows since I was a kid and I never grew out of it. And I continue to watch them as an adult. And one of my favourite things about being a parent is to watch animated show with my own kids. Probably my favourite cartoon is Adventure Time. I loved it. My entire family loved it. I bought the t-shirt, my wife has the dress, my kids have the cuddly toys. In my opinion, it's one of the greatest shows ever made, and I could go on about it forever. I think it's a perfect show, especially for psychonauts, particularly if you've got young kids and want to share some of these psychedelic concepts with them, without ramming mind-bending substances down their throats. But the point is, when I heard that the creator of Adventure Time was making a new show heavily influenced by psychedelic experiences and featuring comedian Duncan Trussell as the main character, I thought this was just going to be like the best show ever, and I couldn't wait to watch it. The premise of the show revolves around an interdimensional psychonaut stoner bum character called Clancy, who has acquired a highly advanced multiverse simulating machine, which he then uses to create different worlds to explore, each full of wacky characters and crazy adventures. Now on paper, that sounds fucking awesome, but having seen it, I'm kind of disappointed. And the main reason being that what I've just described makes up about 2% of the total content of this show, with the other 98% being, just something else. So, let's talk about The Midnight Gospel. Midnight Gospel is a Netflix animated show, which sounds like it should be an instant win for me. It combines many of my favourite things: animation, psychedelic experiences, and comedian Duncan Trussell. I'm not going to lie, the premise of this show is fascinating. You've got this lovable bum called Clancy, who lives in a dimension called the Chromatic Ribbon, and has by chance come upon a highly advanced computer which can simulate multiverses and then send the user to that multiverse by means of inserting their head into a giant vagina-like orifice. What can I say? The universe simulation is so perfect that it will contain entire planets of completely fleshed out people who are living their own lives, unaware that they are merely a simulation, and Clancy will proceed to interview them and get their viewpoint on various topics such as life, death, drugs, and consciousness. Now Clancy is basically using this machine as a form of entertainment or escapism, and because he is a total fucking irresponsible bum, he's actually causing planet-wide apocalypses to occur, and as a result of his actions on each planet, he ends up inevitably just completely fucking the place up, which he seems totally oblivious to, or he doesn't want to face up to it. So basically you have this likeable character who is inadvertently destroying life on a universal scale just because he can't be asked to act responsibly. And that premise is superb. I love it, and the potential for where you could go with that, it really sets my imagination on fire. Just think about it for a moment. You have a character who is doing a recreational activity to expand his consciousness and interact with new and completely alien dimensions to try and learn something. But through this seemingly noble cause, he's bringing about suffering and destruction due to his own lack of responsible use. Is this about me? And these are great ideas to explore. But this is where the problem lies. What I've just described takes place within the first 2 minutes and last 2 minutes of each show. The 20 minutes in the middle is just a podcast with some animation plopped over the top. So just to be absolutely crystal clear, the bulk of this show is audio lifted directly from an otherwise unrelated podcast and then with some unrelated animation stuck on top. So all the possibilities and potential within that initial premise I just described go nowhere. It just doesn't happen. There is no narrative at all that connects these elements together.
So whatever this experience is, we think it's real, and we think that we are somehow inherently real, and it's a case of mistaken identity. This is the Buddhist perspective, at least. So from this perspective, let's consider spiritual practice.
It's a 2-minute intro, a 20-minute podcast segment with some wacky animation, and then a 2-minute outro. And it just does not work, in my opinion. In fact, I found it absolutely tedious. And remember, I was hyped for this. Now, the podcast in question is from the Duncan Trussell Family Hour, and I love Duncan Trussell. I first heard him on the Joe Rogan Experience, talking about psychedelics and meditation, and since then I have been a big fan. And on the visual side, like I covered in the intro, I am a huge fan of Adventure Time, and the person who created that is the same creative force behind The Midnight Gospel, a guy called Pendleton Ward. So it's not like I'm coming into this with some kind of prejudice. This should have been an absolute fanboy wet dream for me. But it isn't, it just doesn't mesh together into a cohesive show. The visuals themselves are pretty good. It's very reminiscent of Adventure Time, it's utterly bonkers and just bursting with imagination. But it's got nothing to do with the spoken dialogue. It's like watching TV with the sound muted and then playing a podcast in the background. It's actually very distracting. There's always been this element within the psychedelic culture that if something looks trippy, then it's automatically good. And this certainly looks trippy. I mean, it's trippy as fuck. But it's also pretty tiresome to watch because you're having to split your awareness between what's being talked about and what you are seeing. The audio is clearly just some dudes sat around a table having a friendly chat, while the visuals are these insane, bombastic, psychedelic craziness and often extremely violent. It's a very huge tonal mismatch. Now, I grew up on 90s anime, so I don't have a problem with over-the-top violence, but it has to be in service to the story. And here, I mean, there's no story to speak of. It's 2 minutes at the beginning, 2 minutes at the end, and the middle is completely unrelated. As I mentioned, I sat and watched this with my family, and my kids watched just one episode and immediately lost interest. I stuck with it for about 6 episodes, but I just could not be asked to finish it, and I wanted so bad to love this show. Still, the rest of the world seems to rate it fairly highly, so I won't be totally surprised if it got another series. So with that story in mind, let's get back to this amazing premise of the multiverse simulator. Because I would love to see a series that actually did something with that concept. You know, there's something there about AI, how callously we treat these worlds that we create purely for our own entertainment, even if it brings about never-ending suffering for the simulated inhabitants. It's basically asking the question, what if the NPCs within video games like Grand Theft Auto were real? What if they actually had a life, and once you put the controller down, after you finish blowing up their house in a helicopter gunship, what happens then? The ethical questions this raises are absolutely nuts. And take it a step further, with the kind of entities that you meet during psychedelic experience. What if you are basically creating them and then destroying them purely for your own hedonistic pleasure, just so you can get high and trip out? I could think of a million possible directions to take this multiverse simulator storyline. And maybe that's what set up my own expectations a bit much, so that when it actually came to seeing it, well, it just felt like a massive wasted opportunity in my opinion. So my final statement on The Midnight Gospel is that it's not shit, but it's not good. And personally, I wouldn't recommend it. But I think it has potential for a season 2 if they could just write an actual story. So that's it for this video. Thanks a lot for watching, and let me know your thoughts on The Midnight Gospel. Did you watch it? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Post in the comments below, and I'll see you guys next time on Adeptus Psychonautica.